Goldeneye is one of the most important first-person shooters ever released. The DNA and influence of Goldeneye is clear to see in many first-person shooters which released in its wake. Goldeneye was a defining moment on par with Doom for console first-person shooters, shattering the glass ceiling on what console first-person shooters could be and bringing the potential of controller-focused shooters to the forefront. Before Goldeneye, console first-person shooters were considered inferior to their PC counterparts, but in the years after, Goldeneye came to define the standard by which they were judged. Many nights were lost the world over, with players huddled around their TVs and blasting each other in multiplayer carnage. Yet one of the things that has occurred with the game in the years since its launch is the rise of people saying that Goldeneye was never that great, that it's aged poorly, and returning to experience it showcases a game which released in the right place at the right time, and that it was nothing special. Clunky controls, poor AI, bad performance, weird enemy behaviour, and a multiplayer mode that is bare bones compared to the suites offered up by games released in the years after. I've seen plenty of YouTube videos, website articles and Reddit threads declaring that the game is overhyped and that there's nothing to see. This wasn't helped when the 2024 re-release of Goldeneye touched down and there was a chorus of "Is that it?" from those who were asking what all the hype was about. Goldeneye's legend in gaming is only matched by its detractors' determination to bury the legend in a deep grave. The simple question then, are they right? Whether I agree or not, I can understand where this sentiment comes from. The reality is that from the end of 1997 through to 2024, the only way you could experience Goldeneye officially was on a Nintendo 64 console. The lack of re-releases and remasters to bring the game more in line with changing sensibilities made going back to experience Goldeneye a bit of a leap of faith. You could pull out your old Nintendo 64 and play it on that, but the control on that console is so alien to most modern gamers that it might as well be asking to phone home. You could emulate Goldeneye on PC, or the various platforms you can do that on, but the experience here is so unpredictable and so tied to the compatibility that sometimes you could get a perfect recreation, while others you'll get a raving disco as the graphics and the game completely collapse. It's kind of a fuss, one which many gamers simply couldn't be bothered with. Because of that, it wasn't experienced in the optimal way by several generations of gamers. Instead, all that really kept the legend of the game alive was the exciting memories of those who lived through its release. So when the game re-released in early 2024 to Nintendo Switch and Xbox One, it garnered a more reserved response. The Xbox One port in particular is not the best optimised re-release, filled with graphical glitches, and it requires the gamer to go diving into the menus to optimise the control scheme. The default control scheme kinda sucks, but I guarantee most people who played that version of Goldeneye never went into the menus to change it. It's a sad state of affairs and definitely not the kind of reception that a game with the legacy of Goldeneye deserved. But none of that really changed my mind over the years. I was one of those kids who got to play Goldeneye when it released. I remember when it became a sensation in our house, everyone was picking up the controller and having a good time in multiplayer. Even my grandparents, who had no interest in video games, were lured in by the James Bond name to blowing us up with grenades in multiplayer. The pull of this game was just that strong. I also remember that Goldeneye was one of the first games where me and my siblings made a competition out of who could complete the mission the fastest. Goldeneye made speedrunning a core pillar of its experience. Everything you do in a level is measured and reported back to the player at the end of a level in detail. The time it takes to get through a level is measured, and the top time is recorded for all to see. It effectively serves as a high score without advertising itself as such. It made replayability in the single player experience so much fun. Very few other games at the time even bothered to try this. But it wasn't just that which had us rushing back to play levels over and over, it was the sheer variety on offer. One of the great things Goldeneye does is it makes each of its difficulty offerings feel distinct within the same level, well, most of the time. Playing on agent difficulty only usually gives players a taster of what that level has in store. To see the full experience, you have to get better and prepare to jump into the secret agent difficulty and 00 agent difficulty. Here you not only get more mission objectives, usually taking you to new places in the level, it also makes the enemies more threatening. The game changes depending on how you choose to experience it, and not just in terms of difficulty. It changes the structure of the missions, how you experience it. It's very clever for the time it was released. It's things like this which give Goldeneye a very unique flavour when revisiting it in the modern times. But it's not just these smaller things that really hold the game up, it's the levels themselves. I will forever proclaim that Goldeneye has some of the most unique level design of any first person shooter ever. Its levels are constructed not as linear pathways, well, most of the time, but instead little sandboxes which have a lot of scope for exploration. There are entire sections of these levels which exist not to pad out the gameplay, but fill the world and tell a story about what's happening in this small corner of the Bond universe. Levels like Facility have completely redundant spaces that most players will skip right over, yet exploring these spaces makes the level feel more realised and full. There are corridors with low details that most players will never cast their eyes upon, but they exist because it's what Goldeneye does. And then you get levels like Surface, which are ambitious and wide in scope. The atmosphere they produce is exciting and interesting. Even when you revisit now, the music, the sense of atmosphere and scale of this level hits you straight away. It's a great experience. Plus, because of the way that Goldeneye constructs its gameplay, there's always different ways you can try to approach missions. You're not dragged from objective to objective by the game, you're left to explore and find your own path forward most of the time. The game actively encourages exploration and experimentation. Of course, it's a 1997 game, so that structure isn't completely non-linear, but that doesn't stop the missions playing out in ways that feel more organic than your typical FPS affair. Graphically, the game also holds up well. It pulls a lot of iconography from the movie it depicts, and it does this really well. Nintendo 64 has a very distinct visual style to it, and Goldeneye plays right into that. It looks great on the console itself. It's clear what everything is, and it's also not hard to decipher what you're looking at. This isn't true of a number of games from back in the day, where the visuals were compromised to achieve better performance. I'm looking at you, Turok, and your fog 10 feet in front of my eyes. It still looks good to play through, and while the game's graphics have long since aged, they've aged in a very graceful way, I would argue. Goldeneye has a very great aesthetic that transcends a lot of the critiques which people throw at it. I feel it stands the test of time, even if the Xbox One remaster doesn't completely complement the game as it was intended. Another area where people critique the game is the animations of the enemies, which is sometimes brought up as a negative, but in reality, they're actually very detailed. You can shoot an enemy in any limb and they'll react to that action. Shoot a soldier in the leg and they wince in pain to that. They'll try and grab the leg and they'll try to respond to it. Graze a bullet past an enemy's ear and they'll look around surprised and bemused. Sure, the animations aren't what you would expect from a modern first-person shooter, but Goldeneye wasn't aspiring for complete realism. It was thinking of ways to make the game more fun for the player. The one thing I think people really like to home in on though when they're critiquing Goldeneye is the controls. Goldeneye was built from the ground up with Nintendo 64 in mind. Every first-person shooter on that console had to make sacrifices to one degree or another. Games like Doom 64 and Turok have very odd control schemes as well. Unfortunately, that is one of the big issues that hampers a lot of these Nintendo 64 games, and it's also why when they've been brought forward to future consoles and PC, they play a lot better. But Goldeneye addresses this directly, allowing players to dive into the menu and not only change the control scheme to their heart's content, they allow the player to customize the experience to get what they want from it. The issue is that the game doesn't signpost this very well. You can't just access this from the main menu, you literally have to go into a level, pause the game, and move across to see the control scheme set up. It's very odd and very cumbersome, and it's a design choice that I really think Goldeneye gets wrong. Because of the placement of this, a lot of players I suspect don't realise they can actually change the control scheme and customise it pretty wildly. It means that when a lot of players start getting frustrated with the controls and they don't feel like learning them, it really brings down the entire experience, and it really didn't need to be this way. It's one of those aspects of the original Goldeneye game that I really find frustrating, and they didn't really change it in the remaster either. And of course, if you played this on Nintendo 64, you had to deal with the Nintendo 64 controller. I won't say it's bad because I actually really like the Nintendo 64 controller, but I understand it's very polarizing. But even if that controller is trying its best to undermine your experience, Goldeneye still controls well, whether revisiting on Nintendo 64 hardware or playing one of the remasters. Moving and controlling Bond really is just a case of taking the time to learn the ropes. It's like any other game, yet Goldeneye seems to become a lightning rod for this frustration. Bond is reactive and it's easy to get him to do what you want. Because the game doesn't require you to do any platforming, you're not forced to manage Bond in a true 3D space. Instead, all you have to worry about is walking around and falling off of platforms, and making sure that you get to the next space where you want to go. But here's the thing, I totally understand where these critiques come from, but I don't think they're nearly as bad as people make out. The game itself is just filled with so many charming moments, great weapons to blast around with, and introduces hugely ambitious features like vehicle driving. Its soundtrack is still an absolute bop across the board, atmospheric, fun, and at times tense. It really is one of the best video game soundtracks from the Nintendo 64 era, dare I even say, from across all of gaming. The multiplayer also became the blueprint for every first-person shooter that dared to include such a mode. Being able to choose from an exhaustive selection of characters, customize the games to your heart content, and throwing you into intentionally crafted spaces is how every online shooter defines itself now. It's still fun to pull up a lobby in Goldeneye with friends and spend an hour slapping each other inside Temple, throwing some random cheats, and you have the blueprint for something really fun. I'm not going to sit here and say that people who don't like Goldeneye are wrong. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and Goldeneye is quite a subjective game. It does things in its own way, and that can put a lot of people off. But for me, the bones of Goldeneye still hold firm and stand it among the best first-person shooters of the 1990s. Goldeneye isn't a flawless game, it isn't a modern shooter, and it doesn't pretend to be. It carries the quirks, limitations, and eccentricities of a project built in the mid-1990s by a young team who were just learning their way in the industry. But that's what makes it incredible to me. Because despite the strange controls, the odd behaviours, the aging visuals, and the countless memes spawned by Natalia's AI, Goldeneye still works. Not out of nostalgia, but because at its core, it's still a solid first-person shooter game. The level design is thoughtful, the amount of extra content is overwhelming at times, and the sheer personality packed into every inch of the experience still shines through. Goldeneye was bold, ambitious, it redefined console shooters and changed how developers approach the genre. Even now, 30 years later, you can still feel that spark the moment you pick up the controller and enter a level. When the music flares up, when the camera pans in at the beginning of the level to expose where Bond is, picking your weapon of choice and then beginning the carnage, it's just so much fun. It was a very forward-thinking game for 1997, and it really did set the bar for what came after. In my opinion, it's a great experience, not because it was perfect, but because it dared to be something different, and that difference is what shaped an entire generation of games that followed in its shadow. Countless games owe Goldeneye for riding its coattails. Goldeneye is still a great first-person shooter experience in my opinion. It holds up very well, and while the limitations of what Goldeneye is as a gameplay experience are exposed more in 2025, that doesn't make the overall experience bad in my opinion. Almost 30 years later, Goldeneye is still a masterpiece to me.